The massive viewing screen in the Galactic Council chamber showed nothing but destruction. Hundreds of alien ships, black as the void itself, moved through space like a swarm of locusts. No one spoke as they watched another defensive station explode into silence. The council chamber, usually filled with debate and discussion, was now quiet enough to hear a pin drop. Admiral Tom stood at the center of the chamber, his weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lights. Around him, representatives of over 50 alien species sat in their elevated seats, tentacles, appendages, and hands trembling as they watched the feed. "The threat is real," Tom said, breaking the silence. "These invaders have already destroyed 3 outposts in the Outer Rim. We need to act now." His voice echoed through the chamber, strong and clear. The High Speaker, a tall being with crystalline skin, raised its hand for attention. "We must not act hastily. The risk is too great. We need more time to study their patterns, to understand their motivations." Tom clenched his fists. The aliens' caution was beginning to look more like cowardice. "With all due respect, while we sit here studying patterns, millions of lives are at risk. The colony on Haven is directly in their path." A murmur spread through the chamber. Haven, a peaceful agricultural world, was home to over 5 million settlers from various species. The thought of its destruction should have spurred them to action. Instead, Tom watched in disbelief as the representatives sank deeper into their seats. "Perhaps," suggested a representative with feathered wings, "if we send a diplomatic mission." "They destroyed the last 3 diplomatic vessels without even responding to communications," Tom interrupted. The human admiral pulled up a holographic display showing the invaders' path. "Look at their trajectory. This isn't random. They're moving methodically, destroying everything in their path. Haven has less than 2 days." The council members looked at each other nervously. Some began whispering among themselves. Tom had seen this before, the start of another long debate that would lead nowhere. Just then, the emergency sirens blared. The main screen shifted to show a live feed from Haven. The black ships had arrived early. The colony's minimal defenses were already failing. "We must vote on a response," the High Speaker announced, following protocol even as destruction rained down on Haven. Tom couldn't believe his ears. "Vote? While people are dying?" "It is our way," the High Speaker insisted. "We must have consensus. We must." The feed from Haven went dead. Silence fell over the chamber again, heavier this time. Tom looked around at the alien faces, seeing fear, shock, and shame, but no anger, no determination to act. He touched his communicator. "This is Admiral Tom to Earth Command. The Council has failed to reach a decision, requesting permission to implement Emergency Protocol Delta." The response came quickly. "Permission granted, Admiral. Earth's forces are at your disposal." Several council members stood up in protest. The High Speaker's crystalline form shimmered with alarm. "Admiral, you cannot act unilaterally. It goes against all council protocols." Tom turned to face the chamber one last time. "With respect, I'd rather break protocol than watch another world burn. Humanity didn't come to the stars to sit in chambers while innocents die." He straightened his uniform. "Earth will act, with or without the Council's blessing." As he strode toward the exit, a young alien representative hurried after him. "Admiral, wait. My people. We're young like yours. We don't have many ships, but we'll fight with you." Tom smiled for the first time that day. "Thank you. We'll need all the help we can get." He looked back at the council chamber, where the other representatives were still arguing about proper voting procedures. Sometimes the greatest courage is simply being the first to stand up. The chamber doors closed behind them as they left to prepare for war. In the background, the council continued their debate, even as humanity prepared to show the galaxy what real courage looked like. The black ships would soon learn that not everyone in the galaxy was paralyzed by fear. Humanity was coming, and they were bringing the fight to the enemy's doorstep. The war room deep beneath Earth's military headquarters was a stark contrast to the ornate Galactic Council chamber. Maps and holographic displays covered the walls, showing the enemy fleet's movements in real time. General Pete stood before Earth's combined military leadership, his face illuminated by the blue glow of tactical displays. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're about to do what everyone else thinks is impossible." He pointed to the largest display, showing the massive enemy fleet. "We're going to stop them." Colonel Mark, the head of tactical operations, leaned forward. "Sir, we've analyzed their attack patterns. They're not just powerful. They're smart. They strike hard and fast, never staying in one place long enough for a counterattack. And that's exactly what we'll use against them," General Pete replied, pulling up a new display. While the council was debating, our recon ships were gathering data. "Show them what we found, Colonel." Colonel Mark pressed a button, and a detailed scan of one of the black ships appeared. "Their ships are impressive, but they have one critical weakness. They're designed for attack, not defense. They don't expect anyone to fight back." Around the table, faces lit up with understanding. Captain Lisa, commander of Earth's fastest ships, spoke up. "They've never faced humans before. We don't fight like the other species." "Exactly," General Pete smiled. "The other races focus on defense, on running away, on hiding behind shields. We're different. We attack. We improvise. We surprise." The room burst into activity as officers began discussing strategies. Lieutenant Dan, the youngest officer present, raised his hand. "Sir, what about our allies? The ones who joined us after the council meeting?" "The Novans," General Pete nodded. "They're young like us, only been in space for about a century. They have 30 ships ready to join our fleet. Not many, but they're brave. They'll fight." Colonel Mark pulled up the combined fleet numbers. Earth could field 200 ships, the Novans 30, against thousands of enemy vessels. It seemed hopeless. "I know what you're thinking," General Pete said, reading the room. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. The odds are impossible." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But remember your history. Remember Thermopylae. Remember the Alamo. Remember every time humanity faced impossible odds and fought anyway." Captain Lisa stood up, her eyes bright with determination. "We're not fighting for glory. We're fighting because someone has to. Because if we don't, more worlds will burn." "Exactly," General Pete said. "And we have advantages they don't expect. Our ships are smaller, more maneuverable. Our crews are trained to think independently, to adapt. And most importantly, we're not afraid to die for what's right." The room fell silent as a new alert flashed across the screens. Another world had fallen to the enemy fleet. This time, it was closer to Earth. "They're coming for us," Lieutenant Dan said quietly. "Good," General Pete replied, his voice firm. "Let them come. We'll be ready." He turned to Colonel Mark. "How long until our fleet is combat ready?" 12 hours, sir. We're loading the new weapons now. The Novans will rendezvous with us at Jupiter's orbit." General Pete looked around the room, meeting each officer's eyes. "I won't lie to you. This will be the hardest fight of our lives. Many of us won't come back. But we're fighting for every species that's too afraid to fight for themselves. We're fighting for every world that might be next. We're fighting because it's right." He straightened his uniform. "Send the word to all ships. Operation First Strike begins in 12 hours. Show these invaders what happens when they push humanity into a corner." As the officers filed out to prepare their ships and crews, Lieutenant Dan stayed behind. "Sir, do you really think we can win?" General Pete looked at the tactical display one last time. "Win? I don't know. But we'll make damn sure they remember the day they met humanity." The next 12 hours would change the galaxy forever. While other species hid and debated, humanity prepared for war. They would show the universe why you should never underestimate the human spirit. The bridge of the stealth ship Shadow was almost completely dark, lit only by the dim glow of essential instruments. Captain Mike and his crew watched in tense silence as they approached the massive enemy fleet. Their ship, designed with Earth's most advanced cloaking technology, slipped between the enormous black vessels like a ghost. "Status report," Mike whispered, though he knew the enemy couldn't hear them through space. "Still undetected, sir," Lieutenant Bob replied from his sensor station. "Enemy ships are maintaining their patrol pattern. They have no idea we're here." Mike nodded, studying the enemy vessels through the viewing screen. Up close, they were even more intimidating. Each ship was at least 20 times larger than the Shadow, their black hulls seeming to absorb both light and hope. "Begin detailed scans," Mike ordered. "Look for anything we can use." The science officer, Dr. Kate, worked her instruments with practiced precision. "Sir, I'm detecting something unusual. Their shield frequencies. They're synchronized. All of them." Mike moved to her station, watching as the data scrolled across her screen. "Why would they do that? It makes no tactical sense." "Because they've never needed to adapt," Dr. Kate explained, excitement creeping into her voice. "Think about it. Nobody's ever really fought back before. They've never had to change their tactics." A slow smile spread across Mike's face. "And synchronized shields mean one weakness affects them all," Bob finished. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Red lights flashed across the bridge as the ship's computer detected incoming energy signatures. "They're powering weapons," Bob shouted. "All ships." Mike's training kicked in instantly. Evasive maneuvers. How did they spot us? "They didn't," Dr. Kate said, checking her readings. "Look, they're attacking empty space. Random patterns. They know someone's watching them, but they don't know where we are." The Shadow danced between streams of enemy fire, its small size now an advantage. Mike watched as massive energy beams cut through the space they'd occupied seconds before. "Sir," Bob called out, receiving new energy readings from their weapons, recording everything. For 15 tense minutes, they watched and recorded as the enemy fleet demonstrated their full combat capabilities. When the barrage finally ended, they had more tactical data than all the previous observations combined. "This is it," Mike said. "This is what we needed. Now we know how they fight." Dr. Kate's console beeped with a new alert. "Captain, I'm detecting something else. Internal communications between their ships. It's not encrypted." "What?" "Put it through." The bridge speakers came alive with strange sounds, clicking and humming in regular patterns. Dr. Kate's eyes widened as she analyzed it. "Sir, it's not just communication. It's control signals. Their entire fleet, it's controlled centrally, like a hive." Mike's mind raced with the implications. One mind controlling thousands of ships. That's their weakness. They think as one, act as one, and can be defeated as one, Bob added. The Shadow's communication system suddenly crackled to life. General Pete's voice came through, slightly distorted by their stealth systems. "Shadow, report status." "Mission accomplished, General," Mike replied. "We have everything we need. The enemy fleet has a critical vulnerability. They're powerful but inflexible. They don't adapt because they've never had to." "Excellent work. Get that data back to the fleet. We launched the main attack in 6 hours." As the Shadow turned to head back to the human fleet, Mike took one last look at the enemy armada. They were terrifying. Yes, powerful, certainly, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Creative, adaptable, and most importantly, unafraid. "Helm, take us home," he ordered. "We've got a battle to prepare for." The stealth ship slipped away into the darkness, carrying with it the key to humanity's first strike against an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy. Soon, very soon, these invaders would learn that they had made a terrible mistake in coming to human space. The real war was about to begin, and humanity was ready to teach the galaxy a lesson about courage. The bridge of the flagship Courage shook violently as another enemy blast struck their shields. General Pete gripped his command chair, watching as 3 more human ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light against the darkness of space. "Damage report," he shouted over the sound of straining metal. "Shields at 40%, sir," an officer called back. "We've lost the Defiant, the Swift, and the Valor. The Novan ships are holding their position, but they're taking heavy damage." Through the main viewport, Pete watched the battle unfold. The human fleet had struck hard and fast, just as planned. Their smaller, more agile ships darted between the massive enemy vessels, striking at weak points identified by the Shadow's reconnaissance. But the enemy was learning, adapting their tactics for the first time in their history. "Sir," Lieutenant Sam called from communications, "the Victory reports success. They've managed to disrupt the enemy's shield synchronization in Sector 7. Pete leaned forward. "That's our opening. All ships in range, concentrate fire on those coordinates." The space around them lit up as human and Novan ships focused their attacks on the vulnerable enemy vessels. 3 of the massive black ships erupted in flames, their synchronized shields no longer protecting them. But the victory was short-lived. The enemy responded with overwhelming force, their weapons tearing through space with terrifying power. 5 more human ships vanished in an instant. "General," Captain Lisa's voice came through the comm. "Earth Defense Command reports the enemy has launched a separate fleet. They're heading straight for Earth." Pete's blood ran cold. They had expected this, planned for it, but the reality was still chilling. How long until they reach Earth? 6 hours at their current speed. Around him, Pete could see the fear in his crew's eyes. Not fear of death. They had accepted that possibility when they joined this fight. This was fear for their homes, their families. "Sir," another officer called out, "the Novans are requesting permission to break off and defend their homeworld. They think they might be next." Pete stood up, his decision made. "Send this to all ships. We knew this day would come. We knew the price of being the first to stand up would be high. But we are humanity's shield, and we will not break." He turned to his tactical officer. "How many ships do we have left?" 87 human vessels still combat-capable. 12 Novan ships operational. Less than half their original force. But they had hurt the enemy too. At least 30 of the massive black ships had been destroyed or disabled. "Signal the Novan commander," Pete ordered. "Tell them they're free to defend their world. We'll continue the fight here." The Novan response came quickly. "We stand with Earth. Our worlds fight together, or fall together." Pride swelled in Pete's chest. The Novans had learned courage from humanity, and now they were teaching it to others. "New contacts," Sam shouted. "Multiple signatures. Sir, it's the civilian ships. The mining vessels and cargo haulers we evacuated from the colonies. They're coming back." Pete watched in amazement as hundreds of civilian ships appeared on their sensors. They weren't warships. They were cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger liners, all retrofitted with whatever weapons they could carry. "This is Captain Jane of the Mining Federation," a new voice announced over the comm. "We heard Earth needed help. We're not soldiers, but we know how to fight." More signals came in. Colony ships, research vessels, even private yachts, all coming to join the battle, crewed by humans who refused to hide while their world was threatened. The enemy fleet seemed to pause, perhaps confused by this unprecedented development. They had never seen anything like this, civilians choosing to fight alongside the military. Pete straightened his uniform. "All ships, form up. We're not just fighting for Earth now. We're fighting to show the galaxy what courage looks like." The combined fleet of military and civilian vessels moved into formation, ready to meet the enemy's next assault. They had already paid a heavy price for their courage, but they would pay even more before this day was done. And they would pay it gladly, to show the universe that humanity would never bow to fear. The battle near Jupiter's orbit had been raging for 3 hours. The space around the massive gas giant was filled with the wreckage of both human and enemy ships, creating a deadly obstacle course for the surviving vessels. Captain Adam of the battleship Thunder watched as another wave of civilian mining ships used their industrial cutting lasers, originally designed for asteroid mining, to slice through an enemy vessel's armor. "Ingenious," he muttered, then raised his voice. Status of the enemy's central command ship. "Still protected by their heaviest forces, sir," Officer Ray reported. "But their formation is changing. They're not moving as one unit anymore. They're adapting." Adam nodded grimly. The enemy had learned from their earlier defeats. Their hive mind was now allowing individual ships more autonomy, making them harder to predict. But that adaptation had come with a cost. Their once perfect coordination was breaking down. "Sir," Ray suddenly shouted, multiple ships emerging from Jupiter's atmosphere. Adam spun to look at the tactical display. Several human ships had been hiding in Jupiter's violent storms, using the planet's magnetic interference to mask their presence. Now they burst forth like arrows from a bow, led by the Shadow, the same stealth ship that had discovered the enemy's weakness. "Now," Adam ordered, "all ships, execute Operation Thunderstrike." The human fleet split into 3 groups, executing a maneuver they had never dared practice in full. Civilian ships formed a barrier of debris with their tractor beams, military vessels launched a barrage of electromagnetic pulses, and the ships from Jupiter's atmosphere fired their specially modified weapons, their energy bolts supercharged by the planet's magnetic field. The enemy fleet's coordination faltered. Their synchronized shields, already weakened by the earlier attacks, began to flicker. "It's working," Ray called out. "Their central ship is exposed." But the enemy commander wasn't finished. The massive black vessels began a new formation, one that would concentrate all their firepower on Earth's fleet at once. "They're going to wipe us out with one shot," Adam realized. He hit his comm button. "All ships, break off. Get clear of their firing arc." "Negative." The calm voice of Captain Mike from the Shadow cut through the chaos. "We won't get another chance like this. Shadow crew, prepare for ramming speed." Adam's blood ran cold. "Mike, don't you dare. That's a suicide run." "Sometimes one must die so others can live," Mike replied. "Besides, we've loaded the Shadow with every electromagnetic weapon we have. Right down the barrel of their main gun ought to do it." Before anyone could stop them, the Shadow accelerated to full speed, aiming straight for the enemy command ship's main weapon port. The smaller human vessel looked tiny against the massive black hull. "All ships, cover the Shadow," Adam ordered. "Give them everything you've got." Every human and Novan vessel opened fire, creating a corridor of chaos through which the Shadow flew. Enemy ships tried to intercept, but the civilian vessels blocked their path with debris and mining lasers. The Shadow's hull began to glow from the heat of enemy fire. Its shields failed, then its outer armor began to peel away. But it didn't stop. "It has been an honor." Mike's voice came through one last time. Then the Shadow crashed directly into the enemy command ship's weapon port. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a cascade of explosions rippled through the massive vessel. The electromagnetic pulse from the Shadow's sacrificial detonation traveled through the enemy's connected command systems, jumping from ship to ship. The entire enemy fleet shuddered. Their perfect coordination collapsed completely as the central control system overloaded. "All ships, open fire," Adam commanded, his voice thick with emotion. "Don't let their sacrifice be in vain." The human fleet attacked with renewed vigor, tearing into the now disorganized enemy ships. Without their hive mind coordination, the massive vessels began to collide with each other, their movements chaotic and confused. As he watched the tide of battle turn, Adam silently saluted the Shadow's final act of courage. They had found not just the enemy's tactical weakness, but their strategic one. They had never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The battle wasn't over. But its turning point had been bought with the highest price of all, the ultimate courage of those willing to die so others might live. The emergency transmission cut through all frequencies, broadcasting across every channel in the galaxy. The images of the battle near Jupiter, showing human ships fighting alongside civilian vessels, the Novans' unwavering loyalty, and the Shadow's sacrifice, played on every screen in the Galactic Council chamber. High Speaker watched in stunned silence as the once invincible enemy fleet fell into chaos. Around him, the council members who had voted for inaction shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The humans, a council member whispered, "They've actually done it." The chamber doors burst open. Admiral Tom strode in, his uniform bearing the marks of recent combat. "Distinguished members of the council," he announced, his voice carrying a weight it hadn't before, "the enemy fleet is in disarray. Their central command is destroyed. Now is the time to act." For a moment, no one moved. Then, from the back of the chamber, an ancient species representative stood up. The Eternals, who had lived for millions of years, had always counseled patience and observation. "We were wrong," the Eternal said, its voice resonating with age-old wisdom. "We mistook courage for recklessness, determination for foolishness. The humans have shown us another way." One by one, other representatives stood. Species that had hidden behind their advanced shields, races that had fled rather than fight, all of them ready to join the battle at last. "The Third Fleet of the Ancient Collective is yours to command," one representative announced. "The Stellar Republic commits its entire defense force," another declared. More pledges followed. Ships that had been hiding in nebulae, fleets that had been maintaining defensive positions, all now volunteered for the counterattack. Admiral Tom's communicator buzzed. "Admiral," Captain Adams' voice came through, "the enemy is regrouping. They're trying to establish a new command structure." "They won't have time," Tom replied. He looked around the chamber. "How long until your ships can join us?" "We are already moving," the Eternal responded. On the main screen, hundreds of ships appeared from jump points. Sleek vessels of ancient design, massive warships that had been dormant for centuries, all heading toward the battle. The combined fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ingenuity and courage had awakened something in the older races, a reminder of their own forgotten valor. "All ships, form up on human attack patterns," Tom ordered. "They've proven their tactics work. We follow their lead." The enemy, still struggling to coordinate without their central control, faced something they had never expected: a united galaxy. Ships of every design and size moved in formations learned from human strategies, combining ancient technology with newfound courage. The battle that followed was brief but spectacular. The enemy, designed to prey on fear and hesitation, had no defense against an opponent that had cast those weaknesses aside. In the council chamber, representatives watched as their combined fleet tore through the remaining enemy ships. Some wept at the sight of their own vessels fighting alongside humans, finally living up to their potential as defenders rather than mere survivors. "Let this be remembered," the High Speaker announced, its crystalline form glowing with emotion, "as the day the galaxy learned courage from its youngest children." Admiral Tom allowed himself a small smile. "No," he corrected gently, "let it be remembered as the day we all stood together. Humanity may have shown the way, but every species here had courage within them. They just needed to be reminded." The final enemy ships, faced with overwhelming opposition, attempted to flee. But the combined fleet, moving with human precision and alien power, cut off their escape routes. "All ships," Tom commanded, "finish this." The galaxy's united fleet moved as one, unleashing a barrage that lit up space like a newborn sun. When the light faded, the enemy fleet was no more. In the council chamber, a new age was dawning. The old ways of endless debate and fearful inaction were over. Humanity had shown them a better path, one of action, courage, and unity. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would the council. The time of hiding was over. The time of standing together had begun. 1 month after the great victory at Jupiter, the combined fleet of the galaxy gathered near the enemy's last known staging point, a massive space station hidden in the darkness between stars. General Pete stood on the bridge of the new flagship, Shadow's Legacy, named in honor of the ship that had turned the tide of war. "All fleets report ready," Officer Ray announced. Behind him, the tactical display showed over 10,000 ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. The human ships led the formation, their battle-scarred hulls wearing their damages like badges of honor. The Novans flew beside them, their vessels now decorated with Earth symbols as a mark of their alliance. Behind them stretched the vast armada of the once hesitant Council races, their ancient and powerful ships now proud to follow humanity's lead. "Enemy station detected," the sensor officer reported. "They're powering up their defenses." General Pete opened a channel to all ships. "This is where it ends. Not just for us, but for every world they threatened, every life they took. Remember Haven. Remember the Shadow. Remember why we fight." The enemy station was massive, easily twice the size of Earth's moon. But now, facing the united forces of the galaxy, it seemed less imposing than before. "New contact," Ray shouted. "Another enemy fleet. They're emerging from behind the station." The tactical display filled with red dots as hundreds of the black ships appeared. This was their last reserve, their final defense. Pete smiled. A month ago, such a sight would have sent the Council races fleeing. Now, not a single ship broke formation. "All ships, execute battle plan Humanity," he ordered. The name had been the Council's idea, a reminder of who had taught them to stand and fight. The fleet split into coordinated groups, each combining human tactics with alien technology. Eternal vessels, with their ancient weapons, provided covering fire. Human ships darted through the gaps, leading precision strikes. Novan squadrons protected the civilian vessels, which had insisted on joining this final battle. The enemy fought back furiously, but they faced something they couldn't understand. A force united not by control signals or synchronized shields, but by shared courage and determination. "Station's shields are weakening," Ray reported. "The combined attack is working." Pete watched as a group of mining ships, protected by Council warships, cut through the station's outer defenses with their industrial lasers. Human military vessels followed, delivering precise strikes at the exposed systems. Message from the station. Communications announced. They're offering to surrender. The bridge fell silent. After all this time, after all the worlds they'd destroyed without mercy, the enemy was finally learning fear. Pete thought of all those who had died, the colonies lost, the brave crews of countless ships, Captain Mike and the Shadow. His answer was clear. "Tell them what humans told tyrants throughout our history," he replied. "Unconditional surrender only." The enemy station's response came in the form of a massive energy buildup. They meant to self-destruct, to take as many ships with them as they could. "All ships, clear the blast radius," Pete ordered. But before the fleet could retreat, a squadron of Earth's civilian ships broke formation. "This is the Mining Federation," Captain Jane's voice came through. "Our ships can contain the explosion. Get clear." Before anyone could stop them, the mining ships activated their most powerful tractor beams, creating a containment field around the station. When the explosion came, their combined fields held it, protecting the fleet at the cost of their own ships. As the light of the explosion faded, the remains of the enemy station drifted lifelessly in space. The war was over. In the days that followed, the galaxy changed forever. The Council was reorganized, with humanity given a leading role. The Novans became Earth's closest allies, their shared courage forging an unbreakable bond. The civilian ships that had fought so bravely were honored as heroes. But most importantly, the galaxy had learned its greatest lesson. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing up despite your fears. Humanity hadn't just saved the galaxy. They had taught it how to save itself. As the combined fleet made its victory journey home, they carried with them humanity's greatest legacy, the knowledge that in the darkest times, standing together was always better than hiding alone.